When my daughter, Clara, finally choked out the words, her voice thick with a desperation she could no longer conceal, "Mom, we're bankrupt. We have nothing left. We need your help," I simply pointed a calm, steady finger toward the enormous, 65-inch television screen in my sun-drenched living room. A popular, nationally syndicated cooking show was on, the cheerful, beloved face of its host beaming out at us as she perfectly frosted a lemon cake. "Oh, you don't recognize her, dear?" I asked, my voice even and cool as the marble floors beneath my feet. "That's Nana Rose. A wonderful baker. She just signed a 7-figure deal with the network last month. I hear she's quite busy." My name is Alice, and for 68 years, my identity was simple. I was a mother, and I was a baker. My greatest joy was the quiet alchemy of turning simple flour, butter, and sugar into comfort, into love. For 12 of those years, that very identity was a source of deep and profound shame for my only daughter and her ambitious, image-obsessed husband. They saw my passion not as a craft, but as a class liability. They methodically and cruelly erased me from their sophisticated lives, leaving me in a quiet, lonely world that smelled perpetually of cinnamon and heartbreak. They had no idea that while they were busy climbing their rickety social ladder, I was quietly building an empire, one perfect apple pie at a time. They had come seeking a handout from the poor, simple baker they had discarded. They were about to discover they were begging at the door of a queen. The scent of my entire life has been the warm, sweet perfume of my kitchen, a comforting, complex blend of melting butter, toasted nuts, vanilla, and simmering fruit. I wanted nothing more in this world than to recreate that same sanctuary of warmth and love for my own daughter, Clara. I remember her as a little girl, perched on a high stool at my worn wooden kitchen counter, her small, chubby hands earnestly trying to crimp the edges of a pie crust, her face inevitably dusted with a fine, ghostly layer of all-purpose flour. She loved those days with a pure, uncomplicated joy. Her high-pitched, infectious laughter was the secret ingredient in every single batch of my famous chocolate chip cookies, her non-stop chatter about school and friends the beloved soundtrack to my work. My life, especially after my dear husband passed away when she was just a teenager, became a singular, focused, and joyful mission, to give Clara the entire world on a platter. I was not just a mother, I was a professional baker, and every single pie I sold at the local farmer's market on those chilly Saturday mornings was a small, tangible piece of her future. The pre-dawn hours were often brutal, my hands aching and my back protesting as I kneaded heavy dough before the sun was even a rumor on the eastern horizon. The profits were meager, a handful of dollars at a time. But when I used that hard-earned money to buy her textbooks for her college applications, to pay for the beautiful, deep blue dress she wore to her senior prom, to finally send her off to the state university with a small but proud nest egg tucked into her bank account, every single sacrifice felt not like a burden, but like the highest privilege of my life. It was at university, in a world of ivy-covered lecture halls and sprawling libraries far removed from my humble kitchen, that she met David. He was, I had to admit at the time, everything a mother is supposed to want for her precious daughter. He was handsome in a clean-cut, respectable way, confident without being arrogant, and he came from a family that resided in the wealthier, more established part of town. His father was a prominent lawyer, his mother sat on the board of the local symphony. They were, in the parlance of our small town, people of standing. When David first came to our small, simple home for dinner, he was the very picture of effortless charm. He shook my hand firmly, looked me directly in the eye with his clear blue eyes, and praised my homemade chicken pot pie as if it were a culinary masterpiece from a Parisian restaurant. "Alice," he had said, with a smile that was both dazzling and, in retrospect, utterly and completely insincere, "I can certainly see where Clara gets her wonderful taste from. He spoke with an easy eloquence about his ambitious plans for the future, his desire to build a life for Clara that was both secure and beautiful. I was utterly captivated. He was the safe harbor I had always prayed for, the strong, capable man who would protect my gentle, creative daughter from the world's many harsh realities. I saw in their pairing the triumphant culmination of all my years of hard work. My simple, flower-dusted, working-class life had produced a daughter who could now ascend to a world of comfort, ease, and sophistication I had only ever read about in novels. I was not just a baker anymore, I was the proud mother of the future Mrs. David Sterling. And I was so proud, so deeply, foolishly, and blindingly proud of the beautiful, glittering future I had helped to build. The first sign that my flower-dusted world was not welcome in their new, polished one was a subtle but significant shift in language. After they were married and had moved into a stylish, minimalist apartment that David's parents had helped them secure with a generous gift, Clara's weekly phone calls began to carry a new, hesitant, and unfamiliar tone. "Mom," she said one afternoon, her voice a little too bright, a little too forced, like a badly rehearsed line in a play. "David and I were thinking. You work so incredibly hard with your baking, 7 days a week. Maybe you should find a new hobby? Something more relaxing. You know, for this new stage of your life. Like a book club, or maybe you could take up painting. A hobby." The craft that had paid for her entire education, the passion that was the very core of my identity and my livelihood, was now being gently and lovingly demoted to a mere hobby. David's influence was a constant, invisible presence in all of our conversations. He began to refer to my small but proud business as your little baking project, a phrase so dripping with a condescending patronage that it made my skin crawl every time he said it. He would talk endlessly about his own mother's important charity work, her elegant fundraising luncheons, her significant contributions to the cultural fabric of the city, and the unspoken, unflattering comparison was always there, hanging in the air between us like a bad smell. His mother was a philanthropist. I was a woman who smelled of yeast and sugar. I told myself, with a desperate, almost frantic rationalization that now seems pathetic, that they were only trying to help me. They wanted me to have an easier, more refined, and less laborious life. They were embarrassed, not of me personally, but for me. And so, I tried. Lord, how I tried to fit into their sophisticated new world. I bought a new dress, something stylish and terribly uncomfortable, and forced myself to attend a meeting of a local book club. It was filled with women who talked about their recent trips to Tuscany, their children at Ivy League schools, and their stock portfolios. I felt like an alien, a creature from another, simpler planet. I sat in silence for 2 hours, my hands, with their permanently flour-dusted cuticles and the small, faded burn mark on the right index finger, clasped awkwardly and tightly in my lap. I even tried to learn how to play bridge, spending hours staring at the confusing, arcane cards, the Baroque rules, a language I could not, for the life of me, decipher. Each pathetic attempt to assimilate was a small, private, and deeply humiliating failure, a stark confirmation of the unbridgeable chasm that had opened up between my daughter's new life and my own. I was trying to learn their language, to earn a place at their pristine table, while they were quietly and systematically working to erase my own. The red flags were not just waving, they were giant, crimson banners in a hurricane, and I was choosing, with a mother's stubborn, foolish, and endlessly hopeful heart, to pretend they were just a gentle, passing breeze. I am so glad you are here. If you are following this story, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and let me know what city you are listening from. I want to know how far our story has traveled. The slow, painful process of erasure by 1,000 cuts escalated into a single, deep, and unforgettable act of humiliation at their first big social event, a housewarming party in their stylish, new apartment. I had spent 2 full days preparing what I considered my culinary masterpiece, a multi-layered raspberry and white chocolate mousse cake, decorated with delicate, hand-spun sugar work that shimmered like glass. It was a true labor of love, a piece of my heart on a heavy porcelain platter. I arrived at the party, my cake carrier held proudly in my hands, a beacon of my affection for them. I was met at the door not by my daughter, but by David. He had a tight, forced smile plastered on his handsome face. "Alice, you made it," he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper as he quickly took the heavy cake from me before I could even step across the threshold. "This looks lovely. Really. Let me just put this in the kitchen for you before it gets jostled." I never saw the cake again that evening. An hour later, as a crowd of their chic, sophisticated friends were mingling and sipping expensive wine, I saw a waiter from the catering company they had hired carrying out a dessert tray. On it was a very sleek, very modern, and very expensive-looking cake from a trendy French pâtisserie downtown, the kind of place that charged $50 for a single, small tart. I watched, my heart turning to a cold, heavy stone in my chest, as Clara, my own daughter, my own flesh and blood, presented it to her friends with a flourish. "Oh, you simply must try a piece of this," she said, her voice bright and animated. "David and I discovered the most amazing little bakery. Everything they make is simply divine." One of her friends, a woman in a silk dress, took a bite and sighed with theatrical pleasure. "Clara, this is absolutely incredible. Your mother didn't happen to make this, did she?" "I know she bakes." I saw a flicker of pure, animal panic in Clara's eyes. She laughed, a brittle, nervous sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, goodness no," she said quickly, waving a dismissive hand. "Mom doesn't really bake like this anymore. This is, well, it's far too sophisticated for her style." Sophisticated. My heart, which had been a warm, hopeful, and loving thing just hours before, felt like it had been flash-frozen. I spent the rest of the party in a forgotten corner, a ghost at their feast, watching my daughter lie to her new friends to protect her new, sophisticated image from the taint of her simple, baker mother. That night was the beginning of the great, systematic exclusion. The invitations, which had already been sporadic at best, began to dry up completely. It was a slow, methodical, and brutally effective cutting of the ties, always buffered by a plausible, if flimsy and increasingly insulting, excuse. For my first grandson's first birthday, a milestone I had dreamed of for years, the excuse they gave was space. "It's just going to be a tiny little get-together at the park with a few of the other babies, Mom," Clara had explained over the phone, her voice rushed and distant. "There really won't be room for everyone. It's going to be chaos. We'll send you lots of pictures, I promise." The pictures I saw later on their social media pages showed a lavish, professionally catered affair at a private, rented clubhouse, with at least 50 guests, including every single one of David's relatives, from his parents down to his third cousins. For Christmas that year, the excuse was health. "The kids have been so sick, Mom, just one cold after another. We're just going to have a very quiet day at home, just the 4 of us. We wouldn't want you to catch anything before your big market weekend." The online photo album that followed showed a house packed to the rafters with David's smiling, healthy family, a 20-foot-tall Christmas tree, and a mountain of presents that reached the ceiling. Thanksgiving. Easter. Anniversaries. Each one came and went, marked only by the profound, echoing silence from their end of the phone line. The excuses became more and more transparent, the lies more and more insulting. "We just don't want to bother you, Mom. We know how busy you are with your baking. It's really for the best that you get some rest." They were building a high, impenetrable wall between our lives, and each casual excuse was another brick, mortared with their condescension and my silent, ever-growing, and unspoken pain. They were not just forgetting to invite me, they were actively, deliberately, and with a chilling precision, erasing me from the official portrait of their perfect, happy family. The final, soul-crushing blow, the act of cruelty so profound and so public that it would sever the last, thinnest, most resilient thread of my maternal hope, was delivered on a cold, bright Sunday morning in the middle of October. It was the day of the christening of my second grandchild, a little girl named Lily, a granddaughter whose very existence I had learned of not from a joyful, excited phone call from my daughter, but from a shared, impersonal post on social media. I had seen the pictures of the pastel-themed baby shower to which I was not invited. I had seen the online gift registry filled with expensive items I was not asked to contribute to. I had become a spectator to my own family's most precious milestones, a lonely ghost peering through the cold, digital window of their curated lives. But this, I told myself with a final, desperate surge of optimism, this would be different. A christening was a sacred, public event, a welcoming of a new soul into the community of faith. It was a sacrament. Surely, they would not, exclude me from that. I didn't wait for an invitation that I knew in my heart would never come. I decided, with a courage born of pure desperation, to go. I chose a small, tasteful gift, a delicate, silver locket, the exact same kind I had given Clara on her own christening day 3 decades earlier. I dressed in my Sunday best, a simple but dignified navy blue dress that I had worn to church for years. I drove to the grand, historic stone church downtown, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. I told myself I would be discreet. I would sit in the back pew, a quiet, anonymous presence. I would not make a scene. I just wanted to see my granddaughter's face, to witness this one, small, sacred moment in her life, to feel, for just a single hour, like I was still a part of their world. I arrived early, my heart a nervous, fluttering bird in my chest. I sat in my car across the street, watching. I saw their sleek, black SUV pull up to the curb. David got out first, looking important and impatient in a dark, expensive suit. Then Clara emerged, looking beautiful but visibly stressed, as she carefully unbuckled the baby carrier from the back seat. I took a deep breath, my small, gift-wrapped box clutched in my hand, and started to walk toward them, a hopeful, tentative smile fixed on my face. I just wanted a glimpse of the baby. I just wanted to offer my small gift. But David saw me. His face, which had been a mask of paternal pride just moments before, instantly hardened into a scowl of pure, unadulterated fury. He said something sharp and urgent to Clara and then strode toward me, his long, angry steps eating up the distance between us, cutting me off before I could even reach the church steps. He stopped directly in front of me, his tall, imposing frame physically blocking my path, his body casting a cold, angry shadow over me. "What in God's name are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous whisper, his eyes darting around nervously to see if any of his important guests were watching the sordid little scene. I just wanted to see the baby," I stammered, my courage completely deserting me in the face of his raw hostility. "I brought her a small gift." "You will do no such thing," he said, his voice trembling with a rage he was struggling to contain. "You will not embarrass us. You will not ruin this day for my wife." And then, he delivered the words that would echo in the chambers of my heart for years to come, the cruelest, most dismissive, most dehumanizing words I have ever heard. "You do not belong here, Alice. Your world, your smell, it's all wrong for a day like this." He glanced down at my hands, the hands of a baker, hands that had worked tirelessly for his wife for 20 years, and a look of pure, unbridled disgust crossed his face. You smell of flour and sugar, he said, his lip curling. It's common. He reached into the inner pocket of his wallet, pulled out a crisp $50 bill, and thrust it into my hand, his fingers recoiling from the brief contact as if my skin were diseased. Here, he said, his voice a final, contemptuous hiss. Take a taxi. Go home. Go home and bake your little pies, Alice. That is where you belong. He then turned his back on me and walked briskly back to his beautiful wife and his perfectly christened child, leaving me standing alone on the cold, stone steps of the house of God, clutching his blood money like a beggar, the silver locket for the granddaughter I would not meet feeling as heavy and as cold as a stone in my other hand. I don't remember the drive home from the church. I only remember the feeling of David's crumpled, insulting $50 bill in my clenched fist, a searing brand of my own worthlessness. When I finally walked back into my own home, the familiar, comforting scent of cinnamon and vanilla that usually greeted me like a warm hug felt like a cruel, suffocating mockery. My kitchen, my lifelong sanctuary, the one place in the world where I had always felt competent, creative, and in control, now felt like a prison cell, its walls built of their contempt and my own shame. I walked over to the large, stainless steel mixing bowl that sat on my counter, the one I used for my biggest batches of pie dough. I looked at my reflection in its polished, curved surface, a distorted, funhouse mirror version of a heartbroken, pathetic old woman. And then, something inside me, some deeply buried, long-dormant tectonic plate of my soul, shifted violently. The years of quiet, swallowed pain, of polite, forced smiles, of endless, hopeful waiting for a crumb of affection, it all came to a violent, shuddering, and permanent end. I did not cry. Crying was a luxury I could no longer afford, a weakness I would no longer permit myself. Instead, a new, terrifying, and utterly liberating energy surged through me like a bolt of lightning. I took the $50 bill David had given me, the price he had put on my dignity, and I lit it on fire with the gas flame of my stove. I watched it curl into a black, ugly, and satisfying ash in my stainless steel sink. It was a ritual cleansing, a furious baptism, a burning away of the last vestiges of my hope and my humiliation. And then, I began to bake. I worked with a frantic, desperate, and focused energy I hadn't felt in years. I pulled out 100-pound sacks of flour, 20-pound bags of sugar, blocks of cold, unsalted butter, flats of fresh eggs. I measured, I mixed, I kneaded, my hands and arms moving with a life of their own, a powerful, rhythmic dance of creation and defiance. I worked through the afternoon, through the evening, and deep into the silent, unforgiving night, the familiar, repetitive motions a balm to my shattered, raging soul. With each perfectly formed pie crust, with each silky smooth, fragrant custard, with each delicate, gravity-defying swirl of meringue, I was not just baking. I was rebuilding myself from the inside out. I was taking the raw, bitter, and poisonous ingredients of my pain, my rage, and my profound loneliness, and I was transforming them, through the sacred alchemy of my craft, into something beautiful, something powerful, something that was entirely, and defiantly, my own. The next morning, I awoke not to the familiar, dull, and heavy ache of loneliness, but to a new, sharp, and invigorating clarity. The woman who had wept and waited for 12 long years was gone, incinerated in the cleansing fire of her own rage and reborn in the generative heat of her ovens. I looked around my small kitchen, at the dozens of perfect, beautiful pies, cakes, and tarts that were cooling on every available surface, and I saw not just an army of desserts, but an arsenal of defiance. That day, I went to my usual spot at the bustling Saturday farmers market, but I was a completely different woman. There was a new, steely resolve in my posture, a new, calm, and dangerous fire in my eyes. My usual customers, the ones who had known me for years, noticed the change immediately. "Alice, you seem different today," my old friend Susan commented as she bought her usual apple crumble pie, her head tilted in curiosity. "You seem taller." It was a strange comment, but I knew exactly what she meant. For the first time in over a decade, I had stopped stooping under the crushing, invisible weight of my own hope. It was Susan who, after taking a bite of a new, experimental lemon meringue tart I had created in my flurry of midnight baking, said the words that would change the course of my entire life. "My goodness, Alice," she had exclaimed, her eyes wide with a genuine, unfeigned awe. "This is, without a doubt, the best thing I have ever tasted in my 60 years on this planet. It is an absolute crime that more people in the world can't experience this. You should have your own television show." We had both laughed at the sheer absurdity of it, a local farmer's market baker on the Food Network. But the idea, as wild and as unlikely as it seemed, planted a small, powerful seed in the newly fertile ground of my determination. If the small, sophisticated, and exclusionary world of my daughter and her husband had no place for me, then I would create a new world of my own, a world so large, so bright, and so successful that they could not possibly ignore it. That following Monday, I took the first, terrifying, and exhilarating step into my new life. I used a small but significant portion of my meager savings to buy a decent quality second-hand camera and a simple, sturdy tripod. I spent an entire week glued to my old computer, watching hundreds of online tutorials, patiently learning about lighting, sound, and the basics of video editing. My first video was clumsy. The lighting from my kitchen window was terrible, the sound echoed slightly, and my voice trembled with a nervous energy. But the passion was real, and it was palpable. I didn't try to be a slick, polished, and perfect television personality. I was just myself, a grandmother in her comfortable, slightly cluttered kitchen, sharing the simple, time-honored recipes and the heartfelt stories that had been the very core of my life. I created a simple, anonymous online blog and a video channel. I needed a name, a persona that was warm, comforting, and approachable, but one that had absolutely no connection to the common baker David had so cruelly and dismissively thrown in my face. I thought of my own grandmother, Rose, the strong, kind woman who had first taught me the everyday magic of baking. And so, Nana Rose was born. At first, my only viewers were a few of my loyal customers from the market, whom I had shyly told about my little project. I had 5 subscribers. Then 10. Then 50. But my sincerity, my genuine, unfeigned love for my craft, and, I must admit, my truly excellent and foolproof recipes, began to resonate with people. My videos were a quiet, comforting, and authentic antidote to the loud, flashy, and often intimidating world of professional food media. I wasn't a celebrity chef, I was the grandmother everyone wished they had. My audience grew, slowly at first, then with an astonishing, exponential speed. The comment sections of my videos filled with messages from people all over the country, and then, all over the world. They didn't just ask for recipe clarifications, they shared their own intimate stories of family, of loneliness, of the profound comfort they found in the simple, creative act of making something beautiful with their own hands. Nana Rose had not just started a cooking show, she had, entirely by accident, created a global community. And I, Alice, the forgotten mother, the discarded baker, had finally found a new, and much larger, adoring family. The next few years were a surreal, exhilarating, and completely unexpected whirlwind of flour, butter, and astonishing, dizzying success. The Nana Rose brand, which had started as a small, defiant, and desperate act of self-preservation in my lonely kitchen, grew into a bona fide, multi-platform, and highly profitable phenomenon. My quiet, anonymous blog and video channel exploded in popularity, my subscriber numbers climbing into the millions. I was no longer just a local farmer's market baker. I was, unbeknownst to the world and to my own family, a national culinary sensation. The first concrete sign that my life was changing in a fundamental way came in the form of an email from a high-powered literary agent in New York City. She had stumbled upon my blog and was utterly convinced that my heartfelt stories and my classic, time-tested recipes would make a best-selling cookbook. At first, I was certain it was a prank, a cruel joke being played on me by one of David's sophisticated friends. But it was real. The Nana Rose Kitchen was published a year later by a major publishing house and, to my utter, tearful astonishment, it debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, where it remained for 6 consecutive months. The massive book deal was followed by a lucrative offer from a national retail chain to create my own exclusive line of premium baking mixes, artisanal jams, and high-quality kitchen tools. Suddenly, my face, or rather, the warm, smiling, and always carefully and strategically anonymous persona of Nana Rose, was on boxes of triple chocolate fudge brownie mix and jars of sun-ripened strawberry preserves in supermarkets across the entire country. I hired a small, fiercely loyal, and highly professional team: a brilliant brand manager, a shark of a lawyer, a savvy social media expert, all of whom operated under the strictest of ironclad non-disclosure agreements. My identity as Alice, the quiet, unassuming baker from a small town in Southern California, was my most closely guarded and valuable secret. The ultimate, almost unbelievable validation came in the form of a formal offer from the Food Network. They wanted to give Nana Rose her own weekly, prime-time television show. It was a dream so far beyond my wildest, most audacious imaginings that my first instinct was to refuse, to retreat back into the comfortable anonymity of my quiet life. But then I thought of David's sneering, contemptuous face on the steps of that church, and I said yes. The show, Nana Rose's Kitchen, was an instant, runaway hit. I was not a typical, high-strung television chef. I was just myself, a calm, reassuring grandmother in a cozy, sunlit kitchen set, sharing the simple, time-honored recipes that had been the heart and soul of my life. I became a millionaire, and then, a multi-millionaire, all while remaining completely anonymous to the public, and most importantly, to the family that had cast me aside. My newfound wealth was a secret, a quiet, powerful river flowing deep beneath the surface of my simple, unassuming life. Throughout this period of dizzying, almost unbelievable success, I maintained a silent, distant, and clinical watch over the lives of Clara and David. It was not difficult. Their world was one of public performance and social media projection, and their online accounts were a detailed, real-time chronicle of their slow, predictable, and, I must admit, deeply satisfying decline. I saw the pictures of their lavish European vacations, paid for, I knew, with high-interest credit cards and second mortgages. I read David's arrogant, ill-informed posts about his brilliant, but ultimately disastrous stock market investments. He was a man who chased trends, always looking for the quick, easy, and glamorous win, and he consistently, spectacularly, failed. I saw the subtle but unmistakable signs of deep financial strain creeping into their curated online reality, the less frequent posts about expensive dinners, the quiet sale of their second luxury car, the eventual move from their stylish, architect-designed house to a more modest, and far more affordable, suburban tract home. As a retired accountant with a new, deep, and very practical understanding of corporate finance, I could read their life like a poorly managed and fraudulent balance sheet. Their assets were dwindling, and their liabilities were soaring. They were living a life they could not afford, a life built on the fragile foundations of social image and profound financial irresponsibility. I knew, with the cold, hard certainty of a final mathematical equation, that their eventual, total collapse was not a matter of if, but when. And I knew, with an equally cold and unyielding certainty, that when that day finally came, they would, after 12 long, silent years, finally remember that they had a mother. The news of David's final, spectacular, and very public failure reached me not through the usual grapevine of family gossip, but through the crisp, authoritative pages of the Wall Street Journal's business section. The real estate development firm he had started with a group of other ambitious young men, a venture funded by a mountain of high-risk debt and pure, unadulterated hubris, had declared a messy, high-profile bankruptcy. The lengthy article painted a grim, unflattering picture of a man who had over-leveraged, made a series of reckless, ill-advised bets on a falling market, and had now lost everything: his investors' money, his own, and, most importantly, his carefully polished reputation. I read the article over my morning coffee in the sun-drenched, gourmet kitchen of my new home, and I felt a strange, cold, and quiet sense of finality wash over me. The countdown had officially begun. I knew, with the certainty of a baker who knows exactly when a cake is done, that they would be coming for me. So, I began to prepare for their arrival. My revenge would not be a fiery, emotional, and unpredictable confrontation. That was their style, not mine. My revenge would be a quiet, elegant, and perfectly executed stage play, and I would be the writer, the director, the set designer, and the star. I began by creating the perfect set for our final act. I purchased a magnificent, multi-million-dollar beach house in a secluded, ultra-exclusive enclave a few hours up the coast in Malibu. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture, all clean, white lines and soaring panes of glass, with a panoramic, breathtaking, and deeply intimidating view of the vast Pacific Ocean. It was the absolute, physical embodiment of the sophisticated, successful, and effortlessly wealthy world that they had so desperately, and so spectacularly, failed to inhabit. I furnished it with a quiet, understated elegance that screamed money far more loudly than gold faucets or marble statues ever could. Each piece of furniture, each work of art, each hand-woven rug was chosen with a meticulous, stage director's care. This house would not be a home, it would be a theater, a place specifically designed to amplify their greed, to underscore my triumph, and to serve as the backdrop for their final humiliation. With the stage now set, I began to carefully arrange the props. I went to a high-end bookstore in Beverly Hills and bought a pristine, first-edition copy of the latest, best-selling cookbook from the celebrated, beloved culinary icon, Nana Rose. I placed it, with a deliberate, almost theatrical casualness, on the large, low-slung marble coffee table that sat in the very center of the expansive living room. I made sure its cover, featuring the warm, smiling but artfully and intentionally obscured face of its author, was facing the entryway, where it would be one of the first things they would see. I then made sure that the enormous, state-of-the-art, 85-inch television that dominated one wall of the living room was set to the Food Network, where my own popular show, Nana Rose's Kitchen, was in constant, syndicated rotation. I calibrated every single detail, every seemingly insignificant clue, to ensure a slow, agonizing, and deeply humiliating reveal. I was not just going to tell them the truth, I was going to make them discover it, piece by painful, self-incriminating piece, in a house that represented everything they had ever wanted and would now, and forever, never have. The final piece of preparation was for me, and for my public persona. I had a long, confidential, and strategic conversation with my trusted publicist. We decided that the time was right for the mysterious Nana Rose to finally, and ever so slightly, step out of the carefully guarded shadows of her anonymity. We arranged for an exclusive, high-profile interview with a major national magazine, a glossy, in-depth feature story that would reveal, for the very first time, a few more personal, tantalizing details about the private woman behind the public baking empire. The article, which we timed with a military precision, was scheduled to be released online the very week I anticipated their desperate, inevitable arrival. The secret weapon was not just my secret identity. It was the complete, undeniable, and now publicly verifiable reality of my staggering, self-made success. It was the irrefutable proof that the simple, common baker they had scorned, mocked, and discarded was, in fact, a more successful, more respected, and more powerful figure than David, in his wildest, most arrogant, and most pathetic dreams, could ever hope to be. The trap was set. The props were in place. The script was written. All that was left was for the desperate, bankrupt, and soon-to-be devastated actors to make their final, pathetic, and long-overdue entrance onto my stage. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon, a soft, melodic, three-note chime that echoed through the vast, open, and sun-drenched spaces of my new house. I had been expecting them for a week, and yet, my heart still gave a small, nervous, and involuntary flutter. This was it. The final act. I walked to the massive, pivoting glass front door, my bare feet silent on the cool, imported Italian marble floors, and took a deep, steadying breath. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see their two hesitant, desperate, and slightly hunched silhouettes. I swung the heavy door open. They stood there on my sun-drenched porch, looking small, tired, utterly out of place, and blinking against the brilliant, unforgiving California sunlight. 12 long years of life, of struggle, and of ultimate, abject failure, had not been kind to them. David's once expensive suit was wrinkled and ill-fitting, his handsome face was puffy and pale, and the old, easy, confident arrogance in his eyes had been completely replaced by a hunted, desperate, and deeply pathetic look. Clara, my once beautiful, vibrant daughter, looked worn, faded, and a decade older than her years. Her dress was cheap and unflattering, her shoes were scuffed, and the worry lines on her forehead seemed to have been carved permanently into her skin. Their gazes, however, were not on my face. They were sweeping over my shoulder, their eyes wide with a mixture of pure, unadulterated shock and a raw, almost feral greed. They were taking in the breathtaking, two-story entryway, the sweeping, modern staircase that seemed to float in mid-air, and the tantalizing glimpse of the vast, sparkling, impossibly blue Pacific Ocean visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows that made up the entire back wall of the house. "Mom," Clara murmured, her voice a trembling, uncertain whisper. It was the very first time she had called me that in 12 long, silent, and painful years. We need to talk to you." I stepped aside, holding the door open with a gesture of cool, regal, and deeply satisfying hospitality. "Of course," I said, my voice as calm and even as the surface of the ocean on a windless day. "Please, do come in." I watched them as they stepped cautiously into my home, their eyes darting everywhere at once, their minds clearly struggling to process the impossible, jarring reality of my new life. David's mouth was slightly agape as he appraised a large, colorful, abstract painting on the wall, a piece I knew he, with his supposed sophistication, would recognize as the work of a famous, and very, very expensive, modern artist. Clara's hand went unconsciously to the frayed cuff of her own cheap dress as she took in the sight of my living room, with its plush, low-slung, Italian leather furniture and its pristine, cream-colored, hand-woven carpets. They walked behind me into the heart of the house like two shipwrecked, starving sailors stumbling into a king's palace, their faces a comical, pathetic mixture of awe, envy, and a dawning, desperate, and entirely misplaced hope. "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the enormous, comfortable sofa that I knew had cost more than their last car. "I suppose after so much time has passed, you must have a great deal to tell me." I let them sit. I let them stew in the heavy, opulent silence for a long, uncomfortable moment, watching with a detached, clinical interest as they tried, and failed, to reconcile the image of the poor, simple, and irrelevant baker they had abandoned with the woman of obvious, staggering, and inexplicable wealth who now sat before them. I let them see the beautiful, peaceful, and successful life I had built, not just without them, but, in a very real way, because of them. Their cruelty had been the catalyst. Their condescension had been the fuel. And their abandonment had been the greatest, most liberating gift they had ever given me. And now, they had come to warm their cold, desperate hands at my fire, believing, with a breathtaking arrogance, that it was still there to serve them. They sat perched nervously on the very edge of the expensive, cream-colored leather sofa, looking like two small, damp birds that had been caught in a storm. David, ever the self-appointed leader, was the first to speak. He cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound in the vast, quiet room, and attempted to summon a shred of his old, commanding, and now utterly defunct presence. "Alice," he began, then quickly, clumsily corrected himself, "Mom. We know it's been a few years." I raised a single, questioning eyebrow, a small, silent gesture of amusement. 12, David. 12 years, 4 months, and 16 days, to be precise. As a baker, I've learned to be quite good with dates and timing. But please, do continue. His handsome face flushed a deep, ugly red, the first visible crack in his carefully constructed composure. "Right," he stammered, flustered. "Well, the truth is, Alice, the truth is that we've fallen on some very difficult times." He then launched into a long, rambling, and profoundly self-pitying monologue about the unforeseeable and vicious market downturn, the sudden and complete betrayal of his most trusted business partners, and a long, unbelievable string of terrible bad luck that had led to the complete and total collapse of his once promising company. It was a masterclass in blame shifting and victimization, a carefully woven narrative in which he was the innocent, hard-working, and noble hero, laid low by a cruel and unjust world. Clara, his loyal supporting actress, sat beside him, nodding at all the right, pathetic moments, her eyes welling up with perfectly timed, glistening tears. "The construction company went completely bankrupt 6 months ago," she chimed in, her voice breaking with a beautifully rehearsed sob. "We lost everything, Mom. Absolutely everything. All of our savings, gone. The house is in foreclosure. I had to quit my job at the gallery to take care of the kids because we can't possibly afford daycare anymore. We're living in 2 cramped rooms at David's parents' house, but they have their own financial problems too. The kids, oh, Mom, the kids keep asking why they don't have their own room anymore, why Daddy is always so angry, why Mommy cries all the time." I listened to their tragic, well-rehearsed performance without a single interruption, my face a carefully composed mask of neutral, polite, and deeply disingenuous interest. They had clearly practiced this speech, honed it to a fine, manipulative point, probably in the car on the long, desperate drive to my house. When they were finally, mercifully done, a heavy, expectant silence filled the opulent room. They were waiting for my reaction. They were waiting for the familiar, soft-hearted, and easily manipulated Alice to emerge from the strange, wealthy woman who sat before them. They were waiting for my heart to break at the story of their suffering, for my checkbook to fly open. I let the silence stretch out, enjoying the growing, visible discomfort on their faces. Finally, I leaned back in my comfortable, expensive armchair. "Ah," I said, my voice as cool and calm as the sea breeze drifting in through the open terrace doors. "So now I am useful again. Now I exist. Now, when the bank accounts are empty and the creditors are calling, now I am a part of the family once more. How remarkably, wonderfully convenient for you both." The raw, unvarnished directness of my statement clearly rattled them. It was not in the script they had prepared. It's not like that, Mom," Clara protested, her voice wavering, the practiced tears suddenly looking very real. I've always loved you. I've thought of you every single day. It was just that the circumstances, they were complicated." "The circumstances," I interrupted, my voice cutting through her flimsy excuse like a sharp, serrated knife. "Let's talk about the circumstances, shall we, Clara? Let's talk about the circumstance of my grandson's first birthday, a party to which I was not invited. Or the circumstance of my granddaughter's kindergarten graduation, an event I only learned about by seeing the pictures you so proudly posted online. Or, shall we, for the sake of thoroughness, discuss the circumstance of a cold October morning on the stone steps of a church, where your husband, my son-in-law, informed me that I smelled of flower and was therefore not welcome at my own grandchild's christening?" With each quietly stated, factual question, a little more color drained from Clara's face. She knew the answer to all of them. She had not thought of me, not once, during any of the joyful, or difficult, or sacred moments of their lives. She had only remembered my existence when her own world, the one she had chosen over me, started to burn down. My quiet, factual, and brutal recitation of their long and sordid history of cruelty left them momentarily speechless. David, seeing that their carefully rehearsed victim narrative was not only failing but spectacularly backfiring, decided to change tactics. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, attempting to project an air of pained, misunderstood sincerity, a man brought low but still noble. "Alice," he said, his voice a low, placating, and deeply insulting murmur, "we understand that you're hurt. We know we made terrible, unforgivable mistakes. But that was the past. We're here now, as your family, trying to make things right. The children are innocent in all of this. They don't deserve to suffer for the mistakes their parents made." There it was. The final, desperate, and most despicable card in his manipulative deck, the children. My unknown, unseen grandchildren, the ones they had so carefully shielded from my common and flower-scented influence, were now being offered up as tiny human shields, as the ultimate tool of emotional blackmail to get to my wallet. "The children," I repeated, my voice now as cold and hard as the marble coffee table that sat between us. "You dare to speak to me of the children?" I stood up, my movements slow and deliberate, and walked over to the large, built-in bookshelf that dominated one entire wall of the living room. I reached up to a high shelf and took down a large, beautifully bound, custom-made photo album. I opened it on the coffee table in front of them, its heavy pages making a soft, satisfying whooshing sound. The pages were filled with high-quality, professional photographs, not of my grandchildren, but of other people's. They were vibrant, joyful pictures of the children from the local inner-city youth shelter, a place I had been quietly and extensively funding for the past year. There were pictures of their annual Christmas party, a lavish affair that I had personally catered myself, with a mountain of presents for every child. There were pictures of their summer arts and music camp, a camp that my anonymous donations had made possible. "These are the children I have been a grandmother to for the past year, David," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "These are the children whose lives I have had the privilege of being a part of. Because my own grandchildren were, as you so clearly wished, denied me." I then looked at Clara, my daughter, whose face was now a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. I pointed a single, steady finger to the best-selling, celebrity-authored cookbook, the one with the iconic Nana Rose on the cover, that was sitting on the table right next to the photo album. "Have you ever heard of her, dear?" I asked, my voice deceptively sweet and light. "Nana Rose?" "Of course," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with a strange, dawning horror. I love her show. She's a national treasure. An inspiration. I smiled, a slow, final, and deeply, deeply satisfying smile. I'm so glad to hear you say that, I said. Because I am her. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and beautiful. It was the sound of two greedy, selfish, and carefully constructed worlds completely and irrevocably collapsing into dust. Clara stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, as her brain struggled to connect the two impossible realities: the common baker mother she had so cruelly discarded, and the culinary icon she so deeply admired. David just looked at me, his face a perfect picture of disbelief, horror, and a dawning, terrible understanding. The woman he had banished from his life for smelling of flour was a self-made, anonymous, and untouchable millionaire, a queen in a glittering kingdom of her own making. And they had just come to beg for crumbs from her table. The stunning, unbelievable revelation of my secret identity did not provoke an immediate outburst of anger or denial. Instead, it was followed by a long, heavy, and utterly deafening silence that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. It was the sound of two corrupt, bankrupt, and deeply arrogant minds frantically trying to reboot, to process a piece of information so reality-altering, so utterly world-shattering, that it had short-circuited their entire concept of the universe. Clara stared at me, her face a pale, slack mask of pure disbelief. She looked from my calm, composed face to the glossy, smiling cookbook on the table and back again, as if trying to reconcile two images, two entire realities, that could not possibly coexist in the same time and space. The mother she had pitied, scorned, and discarded, and the powerful, beloved, successful woman she had admired from afar, were one and the same. David was the first to find his voice, but it was not the smooth, confident, and commanding tone he had used before. It was a choked, strangled, and pathetic whisper. Your Nana Rose," he stammered, the words catching in his throat as if they were made of broken glass. But how? When? It's not possible. It's a long story, David, I replied, my voice as calm and even as the gentle waves I could see breaking on the shore outside my window. It's the story of what a woman can build for herself when she is finally, blessedly, and completely left alone. Clara finally broke. She didn't scream or rage. She simply covered her face with her hands and began to sob, a deep, gut-wrenching, and ugly sound of pure, unadulterated shame and profound regret. It wasn't the performative, crocodile tears from before. This was the real, ugly, and painful sound of a woman finally and brutally confronting the monumental, irreversible scale of her own foolishness. She had not just abandoned her mother, she had abandoned a rising star, and she had done it out of a petty, borrowed, and ultimately worthless snobbery. The financial consequences of their actions were now, and forever, their own to bear. They received no money from me, not a single cent, not a single shred of pity. They were forced to face the cold, hard reality of their bankruptcy completely alone. David, stripped of his title, his reputation, and his expensive suits, had to take a menial, hourly wage job at a local hardware store to provide for his family, a daily, grinding humiliation from which his fragile, narcissistic ego would likely never recover. They lost the house they were living in with his parents and were forced to move into a small, government-subsidized apartment on the other side of the tracks, the very definition of the common life they had so desperately and so cruelly tried to escape. But the social and emotional fallout was far more devastating and permanent. The story, in all its poetic, ironic, and deeply satisfying detail, was too good not to spread. It became a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties and in country clubs about the arrogant young couple who had cast out their simple baker mother, only to discover that she had become a secret, untouchable millionaire. They became figures of ridicule and contempt. Clara, I heard through my friend Susan, fell into a deep, debilitating depression, haunted by the ghost of the loving relationship she had so carelessly and so permanently thrown away and the life of comfort and ease she could have had. She was tormented not just by the loss of the money, but by the crushing, inescapable realization that she had idolized the very woman she had spent 12 long years trying to forget. Their marriage, already strained to the breaking point by their financial ruin, likely did not survive the heavy, poisonous weight of such a profound and public humiliation. They were left with nothing but the bitter, indigestible, and lifelong taste of their own terrible choices. In the quiet, peaceful wake of their self-inflicted departure from my life, my world, which was already full, became even richer and more meaningful. I continued my work as Nana Rose, but with a new, more personal, and more urgent mission. I used a significant portion of my considerable earnings to establish the Rose Petal Foundation, a national nonprofit dedicated to providing grants, business mentorship, and startup capital to single mothers who, like me, were trying to build their own small businesses from their home kitchens. I opened a free community culinary school and a renovated warehouse downtown, a beautiful, light-filled space where women could learn not just how to bake a perfect pie, but how to write a business plan, how to market their products, and how to create their own, unshakable financial independence. My home, which I had once intended as a stage for my family's humiliation, became a place of joy, community, and creation, its large, beautiful kitchen often filled with the loud, happy laughter and shared stories of the resilient, powerful women I was now so privileged to help. I did not see Clara or David again. About a year later, however, I received a long, handwritten letter, its envelope tear-stained and crumpled. It was from Clara. It was not a request for money. It was a simple, painful, and deeply honest apology, 12 years too late. She told me she was in therapy, that she had finally left David, and that she was working 2 low-wage jobs to support her children. She wrote that she didn't expect my forgiveness, that she knew she didn't deserve it, but that she wanted me to know that she was finally, painfully, trying to become a woman that her mother, and Nana Rose, could one day be proud of. I read the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in a small, wooden box. Maybe one day, years from now, a new, different kind of relationship could be built, one based not on obligation or need, but on a hard-won, mutual respect. But until then, I had my own life to live, my own joy to cultivate. They had once told me, with such cruel, dismissive disdain, that my world was small, that I smelled of flour and sugar. They were right. My world is filled with the scent of flour and sugar. But it is not the smell of shame. It is the smell of strength. It is the smell of independence. It is the sweet, sweet smell of a success built not on lies and inheritances, but with my own 2 hands. And it is more beautiful, more satisfying, and more profoundly my own than anything they could ever possibly imagine.